Hi, everyone. My name is Katie, and my partner Shabnam and myself were doing a replication of a case study using SAF-MEDS to promote fluency with Skinner's verbal behavior terms. It was a study conducted in 2010 by Stockwell and Eshelman.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to do some group introductions. My name is Shabnam Razawi. I'm a program assistant on an early intervention and ABA program in San Jose, California. I have a bachelor's degree in speech pathology, and I plan to become a BCBA after completing my master's program here at Ball State. I've currently been in the ABA field for about 7 years. Now to give you a little bit more info about Katie, she's a registered behavioral technician who also works for an ABA company out in Denver, Colorado. She as well has a bachelor's degree in speech and hearing science and also plans to take her BCBA exam after completing the master's program in ABA here at Ball State. Katie has experienced 5 years in the ABA field. Now, to talk a little bit more about the original study that we used, it's a case study using SAF-MEDS to promote fluency with Skinner's verbal behavioral terms. This was done by Stockwell and Eshelman. To give you a little bit more insight about what this study is, it increased correct responses and decreased the incorrect responses over a 3-week period, utilizing SAF-MED cards. The participants were able to read the front of the index card and say the correct text that was written on the back. The fluency aim was 40 correct responses and 2 or less not yets or incorrect responses. Participants achieved the fluency aim and demonstrated maintenance over the follow-up checkup times. Now, going more into the study, the purpose was to study employed SAF-MEDS in order to promote fluency based off of Skinner's verbal behavioral key terms, which is required in a course for ABA. The experimental design was an ABA single subject design, and the participant was a 28-year-old graduate student enrolled in an ABA program. The behavior of this study was see and say. So the participant was to see the key terms printed on the index cards and say the term that was on the reverse side. The dependent variable was the rate of correct and rate of not yet see-say responses. The independent variable was the fluency aim and the untimed practice trials. Results of the study was the number of the correct responses per minute increased and the not yet responses per minute had decreased over a 3-week period and maintained during follow-up checks.
Some of the supporting literature for the original study included topics like precision teaching, behavioral fluency, SAF-MEDS, learning channels, and see-say, and verbal behavior and intraverbals. We'll go a little bit more into that, starting with precision teaching. Precision teaching is basically taking standard acceleration charts and applying a rate of acquisition to learning. Some of the roots of precision teaching are behavior, frequency. This is all broken down by B.F. Skinner's name. It was an article by Lindsley in 1992 that kind of just gave an overview of what precision teaching looks like. Behavior, frequency, standard slope, learner decisions, teaching and research strategies. It's a self-recording method of teaching. The environment is important and the relationships are important as well. It's recorded directly and it's recorded right after the behaviors occur. Another thing about supporting literature for this article and this study is behavioral fluency. Behavioral fluency was something that was talked about by Binder in 1996. He says that the combination of accuracy plus speed of responding enables competent individuals to function efficiently and effectively in their natural environments. So precision teaching is behavioral fluency. It's performance that's characterized by speed and accuracy. And some of the things that are a little bit more specific of fluency is an acronym called REAPS. Fluency can produce retention of information, endurance over extended amount of time, application of material to novel situations, performance standards met, and stable responding in the face of distractors. This is directly applicable to the study that we replicated for our behavior change project because retention of all of the terms that were on the SAFMEDS cards were important to fluency. We had to do this over a period of 30 days. Now I think that, the SAFMEDS can be applied to situations in this class and other classes to come, and performance standards were met. So some more supporting literature. What are SAFMEDS? Well, they stand for Say All Fast a Minute Every Day Shuffled. And they were developed by Ogden Lindsley in the 1970s to help behavioral fluency. Behavioral principles such as frequency and free operant responding are used in SAFMEDS. It's a tool also in precision teaching, as we already talked about. So SAFMEDS used learning channels to achieve the behavioral fluency, and learning channels will be covered in the next slide. They're designed not only to target the accuracy in which the individual emits correct responses, but correct responses within a specific unit of time. So in this instance, it's the number of corrects per 1 minute. The text on the front of the card is what you see, and the text on the back of the card is what you say.
All right, so now I'm going to go more into about the acronym of SAFMEDS. So the S in SAFMEDS stands for say, so the learner makes an overt audible response for each card. Basically, you're picking up the card and you're saying the term on the back. All stands for begin working with the entire deck of flashcards rather than just few at a time. So you want to just get all the terms, the 40, 60 terms, and work through them at one time. Fast, learners should respond as quickly as possible during a timing that is brief in duration. Usually we're keeping it about a minute, and that's how it was done in the case study. The E and the D stand for every day, so go through a deck every day rather than cramming right before a big test. S for shuffle. Shuffle the deck of cards before each timing so you don't become dependent on an order, you don't learn from the patterns of the deck of cards, so make sure we're shuffling. And the cards are then measured by corrects and not yets, and the not yets are also incorrect responses.
So the original study used the learning channel C-say in order to introduce the terms and to measure the rate of acquisition of the terms. Part of the development of the field of precision teaching by Eric Houghton was the development of learning channels. And learning channels are behavioral throughputs in which a learner contacts the environment through one or more of the 5 senses, and then operates on the environment. So in this case, C-say was used for the original study, where you would see the front of the SAFMEDS card and you would say the back of the SAFMEDS card. Here's a little example in the video. Treatment integrity. Okay. So the original study also utilized literature talking about verbal behavior, verbal operants, and interverbals. Many of you know B.F. Skinner to write a lot of the earlier work in ABA, and one of his most famous works was verbal behavior. And a SAFMED's response can be considered an intraverbal, which is a verbal operant, if the front and the back of the card do not read the same thing. So the goal of SAFMEDs is to establish a fluent intraverbal repertoire for the learner that's related to the content of the cards. So going back a little bit, verbal behavior is behavior that's reinforced through the mediation of another person's behavior. And verbal operants are the units of analysis of verbal behavior in which learning channels were derived. So verbal operants have a functional relationship between a type of responding and the same independent variables that control nonverbal behavior, mostly motivating variables, discriminative stimuli, and consequences. So the one that we're interested in for this study is the intraverbal. It is evoked by a verbal discriminative stimulus that does not have point-to-point correspondence with that verbal stimulus. I know in my work, we do lots of intraverbals with, early intervention children, and an example of that would be a fill-in statement, such as a therapist saying, ready, set, and the expectation is that the child will say go. So the purpose of this study was in order to promote fluency of B.F. Skinner's verbal behavior key terms for a verbal behavior course that was required for the participant who was in an ABA program. The purpose was to establish a fluent intraverbal repertoire for the learner related to the key terms and achieve a fluency aim of 40 corrects and 2 or fewer not yet responses in a 1-minute timing. It was also to utilize self-monitoring, which is charting ongoing progress by plotting frequency data on a standard acceleration chart.
So the participant in this study was a 28-year-old grad student enrolled in an ABA program. This participant had prior experience with SAFMED's cards. The setting was done in a classroom environment during testing conditions with professors and also in her home environment during home timings and practice timing conditions. The setting was also free of distractions, no music or noise, and free of other people. Now, the materials used in the original study was a 60-card set of verbal behavioral SAFMEDs. Which were basically termed from the class, battery operated timer, data sheet to account for the corrects and the not yets, and then a daily per minute standard acceleration chart as shown here to plot all the points. Now, the dependent variable of the study was the frequency per minute of corrects and the frequency per minute of not yets. The behavioral definition in this study was that corrects were defined as an occasion where the learner said the term out loud as it was printed on the back of the SAFMED's card. Not yets was an occasion where the learner laid down the card without stating an answer, basically skipping it, or an occasion where the learner stated out an out loud response that did not closely match to what was printed on the back of the SAFMED's card.
So the independent variables in the original study were the response requirement, untimed practice trials, and timed long latency pile practice trials. So the first thing, the response requirement, was a performance aim of 40 or more corrects and 2 or fewer not yets during a 1-minute timing. This was charted on an SPCE chart and also on the data collection chart. Untimed practice trials were not recorded. However, the phase was initiated when the number of not yets reached a frequency of 2 or fewer per minute, and the number of corrects remained below the fluency aim of 40 per minute. So the way that they looked were that the learner would cycle through the cards untimed and separate the cards into a long latency pile in which the learner responded to correctly but took longer than 1 second to say. It's not to say that the learner didn't know what was on the back of the card, but they were having a hard time doing it in a quick manner. So after that pile was established, the one that has the long latency, the learner cycled through the long latency pile in an untimed fashion just to kind of study a little bit more. Then these piles the long latency piles were gone through in a 1-minute recording or a 1-minute trial. And once that was completed, then those cards were shuffled back into the deck and the regular recording and timings started up again. Okay, so the experimental design was a single subject research design. There was no baseline phase, but it was an A-B design. So the A phase of the experiment was the response requirement of 40 or more corrects and two or fewer not yets during a 1-minute timing. And then the B were the independent variables that we just discussed, the untimed practice trials plus the timed long latency piles, which was contingent upon a learner producing 2 or fewer not yets and less than 40 or more corrects. So the method included the timings, the data recording, which was with the data sheet and the standard acceleration chart, and then the B intervention phase, which was studying the cards outside of timings, making long latency piles, doing a 1-minute timing of just the long latency pile, and then shuffling them back in again. Here are 2 videos of one of a very not fluent response, but you can see at the end of the video there's counting of the corrects and not yets, and then the other one is a more fluent video, so we'll take a look at those. So shuffle, start the timer, go through the cards. The one closest to the learner is the not yet pile, and the one further away from the learner is the correct pile. So that kind of goes through there, and then we'll see if we can, yeah. So then now the learner is counting out, not quite. Now the learner is counting out the correct pile. And then the learner is counting out the not yet pile in the back there. I think it was 15 corrects and 6 not yets. And then the other video was a more fluent response. You'll see the difference in the way that the cards are handled and the speed and accuracy in which the learner is producing the CSA.
Experimentation, behavioral, bootleg reinforcement, existing resources.
So then towards the end, this was one of the videos that reached the fluency aim.
24, 25.
Go here. Very excited there. Okay.
Okay, so here we have the SPCE chart that the participant used as a self-monitoring. She had marked the number of correct responses per minute, as well as the not yets over the 3-week period. And the corrects were identified by a circle, and the not yets were identified by an X, kind of too small to see on here. And in the study, they also talk about this form right here as should be and is called the JAWS learning picture, which signifies appropriate learning pattern as the corrects are going up and the not yets are going down.
So some of the limitations of the original study was that there was no clear baseline phase. The experimental design was not stated explicitly. The AB design is not the strongest of designs because it doesn't include reversal. Something that is positive from the discussion is that the learner reached the fluency aim in the original study, and some potential confounding variables might include differences in SAFMED's characteristics. So there were different amounts of words on the front of the card and on the back of the card. The content of the cards might be novel to the learner, or maybe they've had a past history with the content of the card, so that would definitely influence the performance of the learner. And also, there's no guarantee of established fluency in the reverse learning channel. So we did see, say, and the original study they did see, say, but what about say, see? What about seeing the term and saying the phrase? So that would require a lot more response effort to say a longer phrase. However, we don't know what the effects of that reverse learning channel might be. And then here are some of the names that are associated with some of the supporting literature. Just real quick, the full references are listed at the end of the presentation, but SPCE charts by Abigail Calkin, Cooper, of course, Lindsley, Binder, Lindsley again, Eric Houghton in the development of learning channels, and then our guy, B.F. Skinner.
All right, so now we're going to go into our portion, the replication of the SAFMED study. The purpose of our study was, again, to establish a fluent interverbal repertoire for SAFMED terms. And here's kind of how they look like if you were to make them look fancy. But basically, they have the terms, the longer term on the front and the single term on the back. And these are basically how you do it. So base 3x5, entire set from beginning to end, responses said out loud, work through the entire deck. The front is more detailed, the back has a shorter response, it's timed. Practice has speed emphasis, say the answer without looking, done in a minute or less, and the focus is on speed so accuracy can increase. Done daily, shuffling, and your corrects and incorrects are charted. So the participants were 2 female graduate students, myself and Katie, and the settings were done in our home, free of common distractions such as TV, music, additional people, and a few other things. We have a short little video on what that may look like. So I'll play that for you guys.
Quasi-behavioral research, determinism, independent research, within session replication, existing resources, like, stop texting me.
That's basically things that might distract us while we're doing these. So we want to make sure we're free of all those distractions. And again, here's what it may look like when we're setting it up. So the learner's home or study environment, camera is pointed towards the learner or the learner's card. So depending on how you want to set it up, but that's typically what it may look like. The materials used is 60 a card set of research method terms, digital timer, a camera, data collection sheet, as well as the SPCE. Now for the terms, we could show you here quickly on this other slide. Here's just an example of the terms that we have been using in the replication. And these were from another ABA class. So That's what the front of the card would say, and then this is what the back of the index cards would say. Again, the terms represented concepts and principles of behavioral analysis covered in 611 Advanced Behavioral Analysis at Ball State. The terms were created by Eshelman and acquired through personal communication between Eshelman and group participants. The terms were not the same as the original study, but they were drawn from a research methods course at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Now we're going to go more into definition about what is correct and what is not yet. So correct is an occasion when the learner said the term out loud as it was printed on the back of the SAFMEDS card. As for the not yet, it's when the learner laid down the card without stating the answer or skipping it, or when the learner stated out loud a response that was not closely matching to what was printed on the back. So going more into the methods of the SAFMEDS learning, prior to each timing, the learner will set up the video recording device in front of them, start recording, indicate where the corrects, so it's going to be further away from the learner, and the not yet, which is going to be placed closer to the learner. Learner would look at the front of each card and give a verbal response. All the not yet responses are piled separately from the corrects. Once that's done, you're going to review your not yet pile for additional time prior to starting your session. Shuffle the cards and then continue the recording of the video. So now we're going to go into how a timed session would be done. So for the timed sessions, you're going to set your timer for 1 minute. Start your timer, look at the top of the card, and give a vocal response. So flip it over. If it's correct, you place it into the correct pile, which is further away from you. And if you skip it, or if it's incorrect, you set it to the pile closest to you, which is a not yet. And then you would continue through these steps for the entire timing until the timer goes off. And then once that's done, you will stop your timer, count each pile, and then chart your corrects and your not yets on your data sheet. I'm continuing more. So again, you're counting your not yets, you're charting it on the data sheet, and then you're also going to get those numbers and plot them on your standard acceleration chart. And then if you do it more than one time a day, which is allowed, you choose your best timing and chart that one. If multiple timings resulted in the same amount of corrects, chart the timing with the lowest amount of not yets. So this is basically what the just the regular data collection chart will look like. You have your number of corrects, your not yets, your total responses, and the percentage correct. And at the bottom, you just total it all up and you give in your range for each section of corrects and not yets and the average for corrects and not yets. And then again, showing you guys this SPCE chart, you would plot your corrects and your not yets, again, indicated by a circle for your correct and then an X for your not yet.
The design that was used for this study, for the replication study, was a single subject research design, which is a SAFMEDS term that was included in our study. It's experimental control established within one participant with repeated measures. So actually the C part was the definition and the SAY part was single subject research design. So then continuing on, a single subject research design can include more than one person. The original study had only one person, ours had two. But the thing that connects them together is that the person or the participants serve as their own control. AB design has a pre-treatment condition and a treatment condition. So in the replication study that we did, the A was the pre-treatment, and that was without any intervention at all. It was baseline. We did about 5 to 7 days until we saw stable responding, and then we introduced intervention. And we'll get into the results of that later. There's no reversal for behaviors that cannot be unlearned. So even though an A-B design is not as strong as an A-B-A or an A-B-A-B design, there is no way that you can unlearn the terms that were acquired. So the baseline phase will, like I said, was conducted for 5 to 7 days for that stable trend. And the baseline data points of corrects and not yets, as well as the average and the range, were indicated on the data sheets, which you'll see coming up, and the SPCE charts. The treatment phase began when there was stable baseline responding, and the treatment phase included the same intervention as the original study, which is the untimed practice timings and the long latency piles. So the IOA that was taken for the replication study was 20% of the total number of sessions, which is recommended by Cooper and practiced by authors of behavioral research methods. 8 of the total number of sessions were recorded with IOA, and the number of corrects and not yets will be indicated on the data sheets coming up. We used total count IOA, which is the smaller count divided by the larger count times 100, and that gives you the percentage of the total count IOA. Something that's different from the replication in the original study is that the original study did not include IOA at all. So I think that this makes for a stronger argument to have another observer record at the same events. So this is the data table from participant 1. It gives you the dates on the side here. This is the baseline condition of corrects, baseline condition of not yets. As you can see, that sort of stable responding. We'll see it in a graph representation on a graph in just a second here. And then the intervention corrects and the intervention not yets. Start date October 14th, end date November 21st. The aim is 40 per minute. So here are the averages down here, the range, and then also we collected the acceleration as well. Participant 2, same thing, baseline corrects, baseline not yets, intervention corrects, and intervention not yets. Average, range, acceleration, and the dates along the side here. The graph for participant 1, up at the top, frequency of corrects and not yets, of advanced ABA SAF meds. So the frequency of corrects and not yets was sort of variable in the baseline phase, as you can see, and after the intervention was introduced, the number of corrects increased and the number of not yets decreased. Same thing here, baseline and intervention. There's a little bit less variability in the baseline condition for participant 2, but then the intervention corrects increased and the not yets decreased. So then here's the SPCE chart. I know we've been talking about this a little bit here. Successive calendar days on the x-axis, count per minute on the y-axis. Count one is here. And then all of the dates are listed at the top. It's a little bit difficult to see here, but the chart is separated into 7 days. So each one of these dates represents a Sunday. So it's successive calendar days, which is really nice. It's sort of a cumulative record of a behavior over time. So again, we were talking about A/B designs, and it would be impossible to go back to this A condition because it is cumulative behavior that's acquired over time. So it can't be unlearned. So baseline condition, intervention condition looks somewhat similar to the graphs that we already looked at. The difference being that there are also acceleration lines in here. So the intervention, after it was introduced, the acceleration line of the corrects was times 1.8, and the not yets was divided by 4. We can look back here too. So for baseline, it was 1.3. It accelerated by 1.3, and then for the not yets, it decelerated by 1.4. The intervention accelerated by 1.8, and the not yets decelerated by 4. So that was a pretty significant change. Same thing here. Oop, let's get back there. So same thing here, same layout, same dates. Baseline, the acceleration, pretty variable, not as variable. And then the acceleration line, it accelerated by 1.8 for the corrects, and not yet's decreased, decelerated by 4. Participant 1 IOA, 100% for corrects and 100% for not yets. And then participant 2, 100% for corrects and 100% for not yets. Those were collected by videos that group members sent back and forth to each other on these listed dates of the different trials that were taken. So 8 is the 20% of the total number of sessions. So here are the IOA data there. I do want to say that the results indicated that the fluency aim was met for participant 1 with 40 corrects and 0 not yets, and participant 2 had 24 corrects and 3 not yets. Though the goal was not reached for participant 2, there was still an increase in the amount of frequency per minute in corrects, along with the decrease in not yet. So we still saw a pretty similar learning picture to the original study, which is that JAWS learning picture where the corrects are going up and the not yets are decreasing. So that was really cool. That was really cool to see a very similar result in both participants. In the future, we can plan for a stronger research design that may better prepare our learners. There might be a difference in the scores and, environmental factors that have affected the outcomes. And some of the other limitations that may have affected the outcomes would be the difference in baseline. There was no baseline in the original study. Here, we used baseline, and we made sure that we got stable responding before we moved on to the intervention phase. Also, there was a difference in the content of the SAFMED cards from the original study. The content was, although they were developed by the same individual, they were referencing different courses. So also, the handwritten SAFMEDs may have inadvertently gained stimulus control if there were any visible differences. So if there's a misspelling or there's a transition from print to cursive on one of the cards, the learner might be attending to that aspect of the front of the card rather than reading the phrase as a whole and understanding what it is that they will say, what's on the back of the card. Also, the replication study did not have test out sessions or maintenance checks like the original study did. This was just due to limitations of time and still being able to collect enough data to see either an increasing or decreasing trend in the number of corrects and not yets. So here are some of our references. I know we kind of already touched on that already. Back up with the supporting literature. We'll go back to that again. I think we will leave you on another example of what the study looked like in practice. And then I will switch over to you, Shabnam. Okay, let's hurry it along. Oop. Go to the middle here.
Within session replication, experimental condition.
Okay. And this one.
Inductive participant compounds, IV compound, setting compound.
As you can see, I think the intervention was pretty effective. Shabnam, back to you.
All right, thank you, Katie. Again, here's the list of our references, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.